And we're going to start off this class by doing a drawing of this wine bottle and candle. Okay, so for the class in person, we had this set up. You can see the background, the gym. We had this set up, and the students would draw it from their perspective and try to get it captured on their paper. But just so you guys can see kind of what I'm going to be working with, okay, I'm going to pull this up here just so you can kind of follow along with what I'm drawing. And I'm also going to do it smaller so we can kind of, it's not going to take so long to shade it, okay? So I'm going to put this here. I'm going to do the drawing on this side of the paper or on this side. I'll switch it, okay? So just for this drawing, we did of the bottle and candle, we just used a sketch piece of paper and a regular drawing pencil. These are drawing pencils. If you have a pencil with a B or a 2B or anything darker, that's going to be what you use for the class. B just means that it's a little bit softer and it's going to deposit more of the graphite onto the page, okay? So because my paper is kind of bigger than how I want to draw it, I would just do a little outline here on the page. Okay, and the first thing that I told people is that drawing can be a little bit scary if you haven't done it before. So the first thing that we would want to do to approach a drawing, just imagine this is, a larger sheet of paper, is you want to just get a general sense of where things are on the page without hesitation. Hi.
Did she leave her glasses on the table?
No.
I bet she left them in the office.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so then on here, what I'm going to do is looking at the objects. And if you want to do this with a bottle or, something that you have at your house, you could totally do this class, kind of using your own supplies. Okay. So to start off, I would say kind of hold the paper, the pencil a little bit more loosely, especially if it's propped up. This kind of the way of holding the pencil, it just kind of is more like for writing, and it kind of can feel a little tight. And sometimes even just backing up a little bit or holding the pencil this way can kind of loosen you up a little. And so for this, I'm just going to kind of hold it back. And I'm just going to start to lay out kind of where things are going to go without really like thinking about it too much. Like, okay, here's the bottle. I know I would want it to fill up the paper. And then down here, I'm really just kind of getting an idea where these things are. There's going to be this candle. Actually, I think it's a little wider. Okay. And I'm just kind of loosely filling this in. There's some of the fabric. And the fabric back there. Okay, I'm not going to worry about what's in the background. So just a really light, loose sketch, super light, okay? And then, even just doing this a couple times, might loosen you up a little bit. Let's say I'm doing another small sketch of this. Or maybe I want to turn it this way and see if maybe that is a more interesting way of laying it out. Maybe I'll want to do a horizontal drawing of this and get more of this fabric, okay? So really your initial sketches are just to kind of get familiar with the objects that you're working with. It's kind of just like saying hello. Hello, I'm here to draw you. Just so it doesn't feel quite so scary, okay? Something like that. Let it focus in here. It's actually better if I make the exposure darker. Okay. So just kind of loosely loosen up and sketch something on your sketch paper or even newsprint, okay? All right, so then you're ready to start maybe your more drawing that you want to focus on. Let me get another pencil. Okay. So I'm just drawing this so you can see the size of the outline of the paper. Okay. So let's say I have my drawing that I'm going to work on, and I decided I want to do it this vertical orientation, but maybe I'm going to place it place the bottle a little bit more in the corner. Maybe I'll zoom into this picture just so you guys can see it better as well. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna say still the same thing. I'm just gonna start loose. I know it's gonna be over here more this time. It's going all the way down. And the candles here, overlapping it. So just still trying to keep it kind of loose. Something like this. Just a place where things go. Some fabric. Okay. See how that shows up on the screen. Okay, not too bad. So it's very light the way I'm drawing it anyway. So then what I'm going to start to go through, this is like your initial, just getting something down on the paper, okay? And then from here, I'm going to start to show the relationship between, okay? So let's just say on the, like on notes here, we're just doing the layout. Just very loose, okay? And then here, I want to look at the placement or the spacing. Okay, so especially in areas where these objects that are in your composition intersect or meet, that's kind of where you want to pay attention to make sure we have them in the right spot. So it's very hard to tell what this is, but I know that on this picture, this part right here where this line intersects this, that's kind of an important indicator where things are. So it kind of curves like that, and then it has this bottle edge, okay? And then here, I can see it kind of has partially a little bit of an oval here, so, or like a side of an oval. So I'm just going to throw that in there. And then down here, we have the bottle and the corner of the candle. So it's kind of like a little step here. So it's the bottom, the corner, maybe in there. And this is maybe the bottom. And then, okay, about that distance is this side of the bottle. So I'm just kind of looking at some of these key places that shows the relationship between the two objects to make sure we have them in the right space, the right placement. Okay. Then from here, I'm going to lay out and try to draw some of the foundation of the form. Okay. So in order to draw a cylinder, that's what this candle is, we want to just start by looking at this oval at the top. This is like an ellipse or an oval. And we can see now that we kind of know where it is and where the curve is, we can try to look at it and really see this outline here of this top of the candle, okay? So this is already kind of indicating, yeah, that's where it goes. So just go from there, okay? So I'm starting to draw this, still trying to keep it loose, not getting super crazy with it. And I'm just kind of guessing where that's going to go. So I'm just trying to get the overall shape of some of these things. All right, these are the shoulders of the bottle. And somewhere in here is the top. Trying to make sure the width is okay, like not too skinny. Maybe I'll just put some lines where these things are, like the label. Somewhere in there. And here's this little like scanner sticker. And I think the label's on the edge. And maybe the label of this. Okay. So this is just laying out some of the forms, trying to get the shapes. Okay. So shape is two-dimensional. Okay. Form is three-dimensional. So the idea is that we're trying to take a three-dimensional object and make it look three-dimensional on the paper. Okay. So now I'm going to get into some of the rules of doing these basic forms. So for a cylinder, one way we can check and make sure that this ellipse is correct is by gridding this off a little bit and making sure that these quadrants are all like equal. So it looks like this quadrant on the top is a little bit wider. So I'm just going to make it a little wider. And this one needs to be the same, but mirrored. And you can even just measure just with like your caliper fingers. Make sure it's about right. Okay, so I would start it off like that. And then this line, I'm trying to make it straight in the middle. So what I can do is bring it all the way down. And I'm just trying to mirror this ellipse that I just made on the bottom. So I already see that it's too pointed up, so I need to round it off here on these corners a little bit more. Decide where my edge is. So I know where the end of that one's going to be. I'm just drawing really loosely an ellipse, and then I can try to like make it match the top one as much as possible. Let's see, I think this one got a little bit small. This side could be wider. Okay, so this is kind of getting into the more technical portion, okay? Let's see. Sometimes you also want to back up and look at it. So if I'm backing up a little, I can see that this is way too flat. So I would maybe sketch that in, try to make it match the top. Okay. Also, one thing that I'm noticing on the screen versus on the paper is that because I'm laying my drawing flat in front of me, and in real life it would be like, you know, cutting like vertically, right? Like sticking it vertically. The warping tends to happen. So in class, you know, I have people use an easel so that their paper is, you know, parallel to them and they're not going to get that warping. Okay, so just something to keep in mind if you are drawing. If it's a small drawing, usually it doesn't matter, but you know, if you're really getting into it, you probably want to watch out for that. Okay, so that's kind of the rule for drawing the cylinder there. And the wine bottle also follows the same rule because it is a cylinder. So I can just kind of sketch this line. Okay, I know that there's an ellipse at the bottom, and it's probably going to be kind of the same overall shape as that one, but maybe a little bit thinner. And it's a little harder to see because the bottle is dark, and also there's like a little dimple or divot where the glass is blown on there. So it's going to kind of come up like that, you know, something like that. But the idea is I just want to get a foundation for, okay, how wide is this bottle going to be? And then this ellipse that I made, this oval, I can kind of bring it up here and use this as a guide. Same thing, it's hard to see because it doesn't have a clear outline like the candle does, but if we just put some kind of foundation, it's going to help to correct anything that's distorted in the bottle. Okay, then I can see, okay, make sure that these are equally spaced here. Again, kind of using my little caliper fingers. That's about right. This is going to be the center, and especially the neck of the bottle, you want to make sure it's in the center. Right, going all the way up and down. Okay, and then these quadrants, again, we want to make sure that they are the same on both sides. I made my angle a little high. Okay, and then we're using this as a guide, right? So just going to make sure this all looks kind of good, how I want it. And then using this ellipse, I really can use this as a foundation for this mini little ellipse that's in here, because this is like another little cylinder on top of this one for the base. And then this one would repeat up here. Okay. So it looks something like this, you know, without the details of the ridges. This side got a little wide, so I'm going to bring this in a little. Okay. Something like that. Try to just mirror the shoulders of the bottle. And so this is what's going to give us our basic form. Okay. There's lots of little rules for making forms. So this is the basic foundation for cylinders. Okay. And then, next time we'll do spheres or cubes or whatever it might be, and we'll get into more organic subjects too. Okay. I'm just going to put a couple of these lines for the fabric, just to give it some little detail so it doesn't look like it's just floating. Okay, so that's the basic foundation for the forms. Okay, so we laid it out, we figured out the spacing, we introduced some rules about making the forms using these ellipses, and overall we made sure the shape was symmetrical. Sorry, kind of messy. Okay, so then now we're going to get into value. Okay, and then some people call this tone. Okay, which is basically just kind of separating the lights and the darks. And so, you might want to erase some of these grid lines, but I'm probably going to draw over them, so I'm just going to leave them there. And so if I'm looking at the tone, you just want to look closely at your subject, whether in life or in person, in a picture, and just kind of decide, okay, like where are these values? And if we really look at these shapes, there's so much going on here. It's like these like stripes of green in this bottle, and it gets so confusing. Okay, so one trick that I often use is to just blur, your eyes and squint your eyes a little bit if you're looking at something in real life, because it can really help you to just simplify where the placement of those values are. Okay, even for a picture like this, let me make sure the brightness is up. Okay, I wouldn't really want to worry about the little lights and highlights. I could always erase those out later. What I'm really looking for is just the variation in some of these values and the basic shapes that I see. Okay, and so usually when we do value, we have what I like to use is just a small value scale. So we have value scales that are like 0 to 5, 0 to 10, 0 meaning it's blank, 3 meaning it's just like a mid-tone. You guys see that? Mid-tone, so like a neutral kind of gray. 5 is going to be the darkest. Okay, and this is why we use a B pencil to make sure we can get that dark. 4 is somewhere in between. 4 is somewhere in between. 2 is going to be a little lighter than the 3, like 3 darker. 1 is going to be very, very light. 0 is going to be nothing. Okay, so whenever I say a 3 value, a 4 value, a 5 value, that just means that I'm referring to these darknesses. Okay, so one thing you can start doing is just, overall this bottle is dark, so I can just fill it in overall with a number 3 value. Now the whole thing is pretty dark. I can erase some of these highlights later, but I know the whole thing's dark, so I'm just going to shade it in neutral, middle value of 3, just to start. And if you're drawing this in person, I would at least try to draw it on a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, or a piece of 11 by 14. That's kind of what I like to use in the class, just so we're not so cramped up. But for the sake of doing it for the video, I don't want it to take too long. That's why I'm drawing it a little bit smaller. Okay. Plus, if I draw bigger in the video, it's going to get really warped. So, all right. So I shaded it in, not too worried about the outlines. And then I'm going to start to look in here at some of this variation. So I'm going to start to find the 5 values, the darkest darks. So I know that in this section, it's super dark where this shadow of this bottle is. That's super dark. I know that behind here, it's hard to see in the picture, but behind there, it's pretty dark, and it kind of has this like, this is where the label was. Where was the label? Over here? So it's really dark in here, pressing super hard, not really letting any of the white paper show through. And then it kind of makes these like really dark streaks in here. And over here, it starts to get a little lighter. And here, there's some shadows. Just looking for the super dark areas. This label is actually pretty dark right here on this side. Let's see, there's kind of like a stripe of dark coming down here. Okay, and the more that you draw, right, the more it's going to be easier to see some of these values, and it's not going to feel so strange. It's going to feel like, okay, I'm drawing these weird shapes, but eventually you kind of get to trust that they're going to start looking like something. Okay. In the beginning, it can be kind of scary because it's like, oh, I'm just covering everything I did. But eventually it's going to be like, okay, I know it's going to look messy, but if I keep going, then I know it's going to start turning into something that looks realistic. So you just kind of have to trust the process. Here's the bottom. Here's a little barcode of the bottle. Pretty dark in there. Pretty dark on the label on the actual bottle itself, but the part that's covered with the glass is a little lighter. So that kind of gives the illusion that this is transparent because we can see through it. We can see these values that are darker through the glass in the front. Okay. All right, so it's a little messy, but we get the idea here. We start filling in these darker values. Once you're kind of done with the number 5 values, you can go in with the 4s and the 2s and start erasing and getting some of these highlights pulled out, and you can really kind of have fun with it. Okay. Another thing that you want to consider when you're drawing and adding value is that you want to start getting rid of lines. Okay. So lines become more like edges where 2 values meet. Okay. So in this section, what I did was I blended the line out into the darker value of the bottle, and I just left an edge where the glass meets the bottle. Okay. So same thing in here. I'm going to look at where the candle is, like on this picture. And from this picture, it's easy to see that this value of a label of the white candle is darker than the background. Okay. So here I can see that I can bring this edge in where that label is coming in. Okay. So now I got rid of the line, and then I can see that this shadow back here, it's not as dark as the shadow on the label, but it's still kind of dark. So maybe I'll just add a little bit of shadow in there, like a 2. And in here, maybe I'll darken that edge even just a little bit more, just to make it super clear that that is not the same. I'm separating the 2 values. Okay. I think this label goes all the way over here. Something like that. And then in here, we just have some of these shadows that are in the background where the fabric is. I'm not going to worry about that. Down here, it looks like the candle is making kind of the shadow on the bottom of the glass. So it is making a darker value down there. Okay. So, if you get to this step in your drawing, this is kind of how far we got in the class where we're trying to really look at these values. So I would say initially as a first class, like if you can get this far, that's great. Okay. I didn't really focus on doing the details of the rim, I could pull out some of the values in here. Let me see if I can find an eraser. No, I have one. That one eraser that I brought. Well, I can't seem to find it. Okay, well, I guess I won't do that. I'll just leave the lines. Okay. But you know, if you wanted to continue, you could basically work on some of those things. So like work on the rim, work on getting those highlights in. Maybe in here I would add this rim. Okay, but really those are all just like finishing touches. Anything that's super detailed, the writing, you know, the background, you know, it's more like finishing touches on the drawing that for starting off, you really don't need to worry about. I would just say worry about drawing a correct form. You know, some of the things that you feel like are something that you've never done before, right? Drawing in some of the shadows that you see in these areas, right? Anything that you can do to really practice wherever you feel like you have a gap is going to help you, okay? So maybe you do something like this and just take it as far as this and then go on to something else, draw another kind of form, see what else you can practice, okay? We went over some of the basic elements of art here, and so just to go over these are the kind of important ones. We started off with line, so that's the first, one of the first elements of art, okay? We tried to use shape and form to capture the candle and the bottle, okay? We started shading and using value. Oh wait, before that, we did the placement and the spacing. So space, oops, let's see. Space is another element of art. So the relationship between the objects, the overall layout, okay? That's one of the reasons why we needed to start loose. And then another one that we didn't really go over is texture. Okay, texture would be like the shininess of the bottle, the, you know, waxiness of the candle, the fabric texture in the background. All of these things kind of demonstrate texture. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh yeah, and then one that we didn't do is color. Okay, so obviously the bottle has color. Everything on here has color. It's just that when we're working with beginning drawing, you really want to focus on value and form and all of these other ones first, and then introduce color with some other materials, or, you know, colored pencil, watercolor pencil, anything like that. We can kind of play with color. You don't have to, you know, be afraid of it or not use it. I would just say my recommendation is to just start off with black and white, even just with a pencil or a ballpoint pen. Anything that you might have, you can use to draw. Okay. Try to get it to this step. Try to get accuracy in what you're doing. I'm going to go over some materials that I recommend for the class. And excuse me if my writing is scribbly. Okay. So we started with a basic B pencil. So this is just says B. And you can also get a set of drawing pencils if you want. It doesn't have to be as elaborate as this. Sometimes they have just sets of like 3 or 4 pencils in a set. These have like all of them. It's kind of overkill. You can get a small set of charcoal pencils. You know, this is a set of 3, and then it has these bigger ones if you want to practice drawing with charcoal. It's just a little messier. In here, it came with a kneaded eraser. So a kneaded eraser is just a little bit more like squishy, and it can lift off the graphite a little bit easier. It's going to look like a gray little cube, and it's going to feel like putty or something. Any kind of drawing pad, I would say I recommend like 90-pound paper. This sketch paper is about 50 pounds as far as like the thickness. 90 pounds, I would say, is a good drawing pad. 11 by 14 is a nice size. 16 by 20, a little bit bigger. You can get regular polymer or pink erasers too. That's fine. A ruler, I would just say we're not going to use it that much, but you know, to have it on hand might be a good idea. Masking tape, especially a low adhesive or art tape, is great because it's a lot easier to take off paper. And then some kind of pencil sharpener or an X-Acto knife. This one's kind of nice because it has the cover on it. It keeps all the gunk from spilling out, and it has 2 different sizes. But any X-Acto knife or sharpener is fine. And then what else? I think that's it for now to start off drawing. If you're at home and you want to start collecting some different objects around your house that you might want to draw, that's also a good idea. You can just kind of have a variety of flowers or office supplies or boxes or geometric forms or more wine bottles that you can add to your collection of stuff to draw. And just practice drawing whatever you can, maybe set up a couple objects by a window and sketch them out for, even just like 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a totally finished drawing. It can be a little bit more like loose and unfinished. It's just the idea of getting the practice in that you're probably going to need to get used to some of these. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and maybe just start cleaning up some of these forms just to make it look a little cleaner for the sake of the video. Okay. But again, you don't have to push it this far in your initial drawings. Okay. All right. Just trying to get some little shading in here. All right. Maybe the rim of this candle. All right. So since without an eraser, I can't really finish it off, but just kind of cleaning it up a little. All right. Add some shading of the fabric. Okay, that's enough probably. Okay, so you guys can work on your drawing, and then the next class we're going to have is on June 17th, and we'll be drawing something else together there and going over some more forms. Okay, all right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this little introduction to drawing, and hopefully I'll see you guys in person. Feel free to leave any comments in the video and I'll try to get to them. Okay, thank you guys so much.